Dr. Marcus Reeve had stopped believing in miracles the day his wife left him 3 years ago, taking their daughter to Portland and leaving him alone in the foothills of the North Cascades. At 42, he'd traded his tenure-track position at the University of Washington for a quiet practice in rural Whatcom County, treating loggers, farmers, and the occasional hiker stupid enough to underestimate the mountains in winter. His clinic, a converted general store on the outskirts of Glacier, Washington, sat at the edge of the Mount Baker wilderness, where the forests swallowed whole towns and the silence could break you if you let it. It was February 2024, and the winter had been brutal. 3 feet of snow had fallen in the past week alone, and the temperature hadn't climbed above 15 degrees in 9 days. Marcus had sent his nurse, Linda, home early that Friday afternoon, when the National Weather Service upgraded the blizzard warning. The roads would be impassable by nightfall. He'd planned to close up, drive the 10 miles to his cabin, and ride out the storm with a bottle of Maker's Mark and a stack of medical journals he'd been ignoring for months. Then his phone rang. "Dr. Reeve." The voice was male, young, breathless with panic. "This is Tyler Brennan. I'm calling from the North Fork trailhead. We need help. My brother, there's something wrong with him, something really wrong." Marcus pressed the phone tighter to his ear, already pulling on his parka. "What are his symptoms?" "He's not responding. He's breathing, but he won't wake up. And his skin, Jesus, his skin is so cold." A pause, wind howling in the background. "We were trying to get back before the storm hit, but we got turned around. We've been hiking for 6 hours. I think he has hypothermia." "Where are you now?" "We made it to the parking lot. I got him in the truck with the heater on, but I don't know if it's helping. The roads are getting bad, and I don't think I can drive him out safely. Can you come?" Marcus looked out the window at the snow falling in thick sideways sheets. The North Fork trailhead was 8 miles up a winding mountain road that probably hadn't been plowed since morning. Every instinct told him to call search and rescue, to let the professionals handle it. But search and rescue was stretched thin tonight. 3 separate emergencies across the county, all weather-related. By the time they freed up a team, the kid could be dead. "I'm coming," he said. "Keep him warm. Don't let him fall asleep. I'll be there in 20 minutes. It took him 35. The roads were worse than he'd anticipated. His SUV fishtailing on hairpin turns, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the snow. When he finally reached the trailhead parking lot, he found a battered Ford F-150 idling near the wooden gate, exhaust billowing into the white void. A young man, early 20s, dressed in a torn Gore-Tex jacket, stumbled out as Marcus pulled up. "Dr. Reeve! Thank God, he's in the back seat." Marcus grabbed his medical bag and followed Tyler to the truck. The interior light illuminated a scene that made his stomach clench. A man in his late 20s, unconscious, sprawled across the back seat with his head lolled to one side. His lips were blue-gray, his skin waxy and pale. Marcus pressed 2 fingers to his neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but faint and irregular. 40 beats per minute, maybe less. How long has he been like this? Maybe an hour. We were trying to make it back before dark, but we got lost near Cougar Creek. The trail markers were buried. We ended up going in circles. Tyler's voice cracked, and then we saw it. Marcus was pulling off the man's wet gloves, checking his fingers for frostbite. "Saw what?" Tyler hesitated. "I don't know how to explain it. Something big. It was standing in the trees, just watching us. At first I thought it was a bear, but it was walking upright, and it had this face, like a human, but not." "Jesus, I sound crazy." Marcus didn't respond. He'd heard versions of this story before, usually from hikers who'd spent too long in the cold, their brains oxygen-starved and hallucinating. He focused on the patient, moderate to severe hypothermia, possible frostbite on 3 fingers of the left hand, altered mental status. He needed to get him to the clinic, fast. "Help me get him into my car. We need to move now." They transferred the unconscious man, Tyler said his name was Jason, into Marcus's back seat, layering him with emergency blankets. Marcus started the engine, cranked the heat to maximum, and began the slow, treacherous drive back down the mountain. Tyler followed in the truck, headlights cutting through the storm. The clinic was dark when they arrived. Marcus unlocked the door and guided Tyler inside, directing him to the examination room in the back. They laid Jason on the table under the harsh fluorescent lights. Marcus worked quickly, methodically, removing wet clothing, wrapping the patient in heated blankets, starting an IV line with warm saline. He attached a pulse oximeter to Jason's finger and watched the numbers climb slowly. Oxygen saturation at 82%, heart rate at 45. Is he going to be okay? Tyler hovered near the doorway, arms wrapped around himself. I don't know yet, Marcus said honestly. Hypothermia this severe can cause cardiac arrest. We need to rewarm him slowly. Too fast, and we risk sending cold blood from his extremities back to his heart, which could kill him. He adjusted the blankets, checked the IV flow. You said you saw something in the woods. Can you describe it more clearly? Tyler shook his head. It doesn't matter. I was probably seeing things. Humor me. Tyler took a shaky breath. It was tall, 7, maybe 8 feet, covered in dark hair but not like a bear. The way it moved, it was deliberate, careful, and its eyes, they reflected our headlamps, but there was something in them, like it was thinking. He laughed bitterly. I told you I sound crazy. Marcus said nothing. He'd lived in these mountains long enough to know that people saw things they couldn't explain. Shadows in the trees, shapes in the mist, sounds that didn't belong to any known animal. Most of it was nothing, the brain's attempt to impose pattern on chaos. But sometimes, Jason's eyelids fluttered. Marcus leaned closer. Jason, can you hear me? A low moan. Jason's head turned slightly, his lips moving soundlessly. You're safe, Marcus said. You're in a clinic. You were severely hypothermic, but you're warming up. Try not to move too much. Jason's eyes opened, unfocused, glassy, pupils dilated. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then turned his head toward Marcus. When he spoke, his voice was a rasp. It carried me. Marcus frowned. What? I fell, twisted my ankle, couldn't walk. Jason's breathing was labored, each word an effort. Tyler went ahead to find the trail. I was alone, and then it came out of the trees. I thought I was dead, but it picked me up, carried me almost a mile, put me down where Tyler could find me. Tyler stepped forward, his face pale. Jason, you were delirious. You don't remember it right. I remember. Jason's eyes locked onto Marcus's. It saved me. Why would it save me? Marcus checked the pulse oximeter again. 87% now, heart rate at 52. Better, but still dangerously low. He made a note on his clipboard, his mind racing. Hypothermia could cause hallucinations, false memories, confabulation. But there was something in Jason's tone, a clarity that didn't match the fog of hypothermia. Rest, Marcus said. We'll talk about it later. But Jason gripped his wrist with surprising strength. You have to promise me something. If I tell you the truth, if I show you, you can't tell anyone. Not the authorities, not the press, no one. Jason, you need to calm down. Promise me. Marcus looked at Tyler, who was staring at his brother with a mixture of fear and confusion. Then he looked back at Jason, at the desperation in his eyes. I promise. Jason released his wrist and closed his eyes. Within minutes he was asleep, a real sleep now, his breathing steady, his color slowly returning. Marcus checked his vitals one more time, then stepped into the hallway. Tyler followed. What did he mean, show you? Tyler asked. Marcus shook his head. I have no idea. But right now, I'm more concerned with keeping him alive. He glanced at the window, where snow was still falling in thick curtains. You should stay here tonight. The roads aren't safe, and I need someone to help monitor him. Tyler nodded. Okay. They settled into a long night. Marcus took vitals every 30 minutes, watching Jason's temperature climb from 89 degrees to 93, then 96. By 2 in the morning, Jason was fully conscious, able to speak in full sentences, complaining about the pain in his left hand where frostbite had blackened the tips of 2 fingers. Marcus irrigated the wounds, applied topical antibiotics, and wrapped them in sterile gauze. We'll need to watch those closely, he said. If there's tissue necrosis, you might lose the fingertips. Jason nodded, barely listening. His eyes kept drifting to the window, to the darkness beyond. "It's still out there," he said quietly. Marcus followed his gaze. "What makes you say that?" "I can feel it, like it's watching." Tyler, dozing in a chair near the corner, stirred. "Jason, stop, you're freaking me out." But Jason ignored him. He sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his muscles. "Dr. Reeve, can I talk to you? Alone?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. He gestured for Tyler to step out, waiting until the door closed before turning back to Jason. "What's going on?" Jason reached into the pocket of his jacket, still draped over a chair, and pulled out something wrapped in a torn piece of cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing what looked like a piece of carved wood about 6 inches long and 2 inches wide. The surface was covered in markings, geometric patterns, stylized animals, something that might have been a human figure. "It gave me this," Jason said, "right before it left me. Pressed it into my hand." Marcus took the object, turning it over in his hands. The wood was dense, dark, polished smooth by age or handling. The carvings were deliberate, precise, not random scratches but intentional symbols. He'd seen similar work in museums, artifacts from indigenous cultures, but this felt different, older, more personal. "Where did this come from?" "I told you. It gave it to me." Jason's voice was steady now, certain. "Dr. Reeve, I know what I saw. I know what I felt. That thing, whatever it wasn't just an animal. It was intelligent. It made a choice to save me. And then it gave me this, like it wanted me to remember." Marcus set the carved wood on the table between them. "Jason, you were suffering from severe hypothermia. Your brain was oxygen deprived. Hallucinations are common in that state. I know the difference between a hallucination and reality." Jason leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You promised you'd listen. You promised you wouldn't tell anyone." "I did. Then listen, I need to go back. I need to find it again." "That's insane. You almost died out there." "I know, but I also know that I saw something that shouldn't exist, and I think it wants to communicate. Why else would it give me this?" He gestured to the carved wood. "I'm not asking you to come with me. I'm just asking you not to stop me." Marcus looked at Jason for a long moment, then at the piece of wood. The carvings seemed to shift in the fluorescent light, shadows deepening the grooves. He thought about his life in this quiet mountain town, the monotony of treating sprained ankles and seasonal flu, the slow erosion of everything he'd once believed mattered. He thought about miracles and the absence of them, and then he thought about the impossibility of what Jason was describing and the even greater impossibility of ignoring it. "If you go back," he said slowly, "I'm going with you." Jason smiled, a tired, grateful expression. "Thank you, but not until you're fully recovered, and not alone. We do this carefully, methodically. If there's something out there, something intelligent, we need to approach it the right way." Marcus picked up the carved wood again, tracing the symbols with his finger. "And we need to figure out what this means." Jason nodded. "Agreed." They spent the rest of the night in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the blizzard howled, burying the world in white, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the window, something ancient and unknowable waited, watching. It took Jason 4 days to recover enough for Marcus to clear him for a return to the mountains. The frostbite on his fingers had stabilized. He'd keep the fingertips, though they'd be numb for months, and his core temperature had normalized. Tyler had returned to Seattle after the first night, skeptical and worried, but Jason refused to leave. He camped out in Marcus's spare room above the clinic, spending hours studying the carved wood, sketching the symbols in a notebook, searching for patterns. Marcus, for his part, threw himself into research. He contacted colleagues at the university, anthropologists and primatologists, asking vague questions about tool use in great apes, symbolic communication, and cultural transmission in non-human species. He avoided specifics, couching everything in hypotheticals, but the more he learned, the more he realized how little they actually knew. Gorillas used tools. Orangutans created art. Bonobos could learn sign language. Intelligence wasn't a binary, It was a spectrum, and the dividing line between human and other was far blurrier than most people wanted to admit. On the fifth day, they returned to the North Fork trailhead. The storm had passed, leaving the world crystallized and silent. Marcus packed his medical bag with extra supplies, hypothermia blankets, glucose gel, emergency flares, and added a digital voice recorder, a camera, and a notebook. Jason carried a backpack filled with food, water, and the carved wood wrapped carefully in cloth. They hiked in slowly, following the trail markers when they could find them, using GPS when they couldn't. The snow was deep, thigh-high in places, and the going was exhausting. Marcus, who'd spent the past 3 years behind a desk, felt his lungs burning within the first hour. Jason moved more easily, his younger body compensating for the lingering stiffness in his ankle. "Where exactly did you encounter it?" Marcus asked when they paused to rest near Cougar Creek. Jason pointed upstream toward a dense stand of old-growth cedar and Douglas fir. "Maybe half a mile that way. There's a ridge with a rock outcropping. That's where I fell." They pressed on. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual chatter of birds and small mammals muted by the snow. Marcus found himself scanning the trees, looking for movement, for shapes that didn't belong. He felt exposed, watched. They reached the ridge just after noon. The outcropping Jason described jutted from the hillside like a broken tooth, its surface slick with ice. Below it, a narrow ledge dropped away into a steep ravine. Marcus could see how someone might lose their footing here, how a twisted ankle could become life-threatening in minutes. "This is it," Jason said. "I was trying to climb down when I slipped. My ankle gave out and I went down hard. That's when Tyler went for help." He pointed to a spot near the base of the outcropping. "I was lying there, maybe 10 feet from the edge, when it appeared." Marcus scanned the area, looking for tracks, for any sign of passage. But the snow had covered everything, smoothing the landscape into a blank slate. "What do we do now?" he asked. Jason pulled out the carved wood. "We wait, and we show it this." They waited for 3 hours. The cold seeped into Marcus's bones, despite his layers, and his fingers grew numb inside his gloves. He was about to suggest they call it a day when Jason grabbed his arm. "There." Marcus followed his gaze. At first, he saw nothing. Just trees and shadows, the monotonous white and brown palette of a winter forest. Then he saw it, a shape, tall and dark, standing motionless about 50 yards upslope. It was partially obscured by a cluster of hemlocks, but he could make out the general form, bipedal, massive, covered in what looked like dark brown or reddish-brown hair. His breath caught. Every rational part of his brain screamed that this was impossible, a trick of light and shadow, a bear standing upright. But the longer he stared, the more details emerged. The breadth of the shoulders, the length of the arms, the shape of the head. Sagittal crest visible even at this distance. Face flat and broad, eyes forward-facing. "Don't move," Jason whispered. The creature, Marcus couldn't think of another word for it, tilted its head, studying them. Then, slowly, deliberately, it stepped forward. One step, then another, moving with a fluidity that no bear could replicate. It stopped about 30 yards away, close enough that Marcus could see the rise and fall of its chest, the vapor of its breath in the cold air. Jason held up the carved wood. The creature's eyes, dark, deeply set beneath a prominent brow ridge, fixed on the object. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the creature raised one massive hand, fingers long and articulated, nails thick and curved, and made a gesture, a sweeping motion from chest outward, palm up. "It's asking for it," Jason breathed. "We don't know that." "Yes, we do." Jason took a step forward. Marcus grabbed his arm, but Jason shook him off. He took another step, then another, moving slowly, keeping the carved wood visible. The creature watched, but didn't retreat. When Jason was within 10 feet, he stopped and held out the object. The creature leaned down. Its height was staggering, easily 7.5 feet, and took the wood with surprising gentleness. It turned the object over in its hands, fingers tracing the carvings. Then it looked up at Jason, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, something Marcus couldn't name. The creature made a low vocalization, a sound that resonated in Marcus's chest. It wasn't a growl or a roar, but something more controlled, more deliberate. It sounded almost like speech, though Marcus couldn't identify any phonemes he recognized. Jason pointed to the carvings, then to himself, then back to the creature. "Did you make this?" The creature's eyes shifted to Marcus, appraising him. Marcus felt his pulse hammering. He was looking at something that shouldn't exist, something that upended every assumption about human uniqueness, about the history of hominid evolution. If this creature was what it appeared to be, a surviving population of Gigantopithecus, or an unknown branch of Homo, or something else entirely, it represented the most significant biological discovery of the century. The creature made another sound, then turned and walked back into the forest, but before it disappeared, it paused and looked back, making the same gesture, the sweeping motion, palm up, an invitation. "It wants us to follow," Jason said. "Jason, we have no idea." "I'm following." Marcus hesitated for only a moment. Then he grabbed his bag and followed Jason into the trees. They walked for over an hour, climbing steadily upslope, moving through terrain that grew increasingly difficult. The creature led them with surprising consideration, pausing when they fell too far behind, choosing routes that avoided the steepest drops and most treacherous ice. It moved silently, placing its feet bare, with a divergent hallux, the big toe angled like a thumb, with precision that left minimal tracks. Finally, they emerged into a small valley, sheltered on three sides by steep cliffs. The valley floor was dotted with massive cedars, their trunks wider than Marcus was tall, and nestled among the trees were structures. Marcus stopped, his breath fogging in the cold air. The structures were simple but deliberate, frameworks of branches and logs, woven with moss and bark, creating windbreaks and shelters. Near the center of the valley, he could see what looked like a fire pit, the stones blackened with soot. And beyond that, partially hidden by a fallen log, something else, a mound of stones arranged in a cairn-like formation. "A settlement," he breathed. "Jesus Christ, it's a settlement." The creature led them to the largest shelter and gestured for them to sit. Marcus and Jason lowered themselves onto a log that had been stripped of bark, its surface worn smooth by use. The creature knelt, its knees articulating backward like a human's, not forward like a bear's, and began arranging objects on the ground between them. More carved wood, but also stones painted with ochre, arranged in patterns, what looked like dried plants, bundled with cordage made from bark, bones, small animal bones, carved with notches and marks. The creature picked up each object and made sounds, gestures, sometimes both. It was showing them something, teaching them. Marcus activated his voice recorder and began taking notes. Jason pulled out his sketchbook and started drawing, capturing the symbols, the gestures, the arrangement of objects. They worked in silence, too awed to speak, while the creature patiently repeated sequences, correcting them when they misunderstood. Hours passed. The light began to fail. The creature stood and moved to the fire pit, where it arranged kindling with practiced efficiency. But it didn't light the fire. Instead, it turned to Marcus and Jason and made a questioning sound, accompanied by a gesture, rubbing two sticks together. "It's asking if we have fire," Jason said. Marcus pulled a lighter from his pocket and held it up. The creature's eyes widened, surprise or maybe recognition. Marcus approached the fire pit, knelt, and flicked the lighter. The flame caught on the kindling, spreading quickly through the dried wood. The creature made a sound, deeper, more complex than before. It reached out and touched Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that felt almost like gratitude. Then it settled by the fire and began another demonstration. It was teaching them survival techniques, how to identify edible plants even in winter, how to construct a shelter that conserved heat, how to move through snow without leaving excessive tracks. The knowledge was intricate, refined over generations, maybe centuries, of living in these mountains unseen. At one point, the creature retrieved a section of bark covered in symbols similar to those on the carved wood. It pointed to one symbol, a stylized human figure, and then to Marcus and Jason. Then it pointed to another symbol, a figure that looked like the creature itself, with exaggerated height and bulk, and tapped its own chest. "It's showing us a relationship," Marcus said slowly. "These symbols represent us and them. It's drawing a connection." Jason leaned closer. "Are they saying they're related to us?" The creature made a soft vocalization and picked up a stick. In the snow beside the fire, it drew two branching lines, starting from a single point. It tapped the base of the tree, the common origin, then traced each branch, ending with the human symbol on one side and its own symbol on the other. "A phylogenetic tree," Marcus whispered. "It's showing us evolutionary divergence." The implications were staggering. This creature understood its own biological history. It knew that it shared a common ancestor with humans, and it was deliberately communicating that knowledge. Over the next hour, they built a rudimentary communication system. The creature, Marcus started thinking of it as the teacher, for lack of a better term, would make a gesture or draw a symbol, and they would attempt to replicate it. When they succeeded, the teacher would make a sound that seemed to indicate approval, a low, rumbling vocalization that Jason started calling the good sound. When they failed, it would patiently repeat, sometimes using different gestures or symbols to convey the same concept. They learned signs for basic concepts: water, food, shelter, danger, safe. They learned that the teacher's people, Marcus estimated there were at least a dozen, based on the size of the settlement, had been living in this valley for generations, moving seasonally to follow resources, avoiding humans except when absolutely necessary. "Why did you save me?" Jason asked, speaking slowly, accompanying his words with the signs they'd learned. The teacher tilted its head, considering. Then it made a complex series of gestures, pointing to Jason, making the sign for danger, then making a gesture they'd learned meant connected or related, and finally placing one massive hand over its heart. "Because we're family," Marcus said softly. "Because we're related, and you don't let family die." The teacher made the good sound. As the fire burned low, the teacher brought out one more object, a piece of hide, probably deer, stretched over a wooden frame. The hide was covered in what looked like a star chart, constellations marked in charcoal and ochre, with lines connecting key stars. But there was something else, symbols representing seasons, phases of the moon, and what might have been a calendar system. The teacher pointed to a cluster of stars, Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, and then to a symbol that looked like the settlement. Then it traced a line to another cluster and pointed to a different symbol, this one showing mountains and what might have been a coastline. "They migrate," Marcus said. "They move between different camps based on the seasons." The teacher nodded, an unmistakably human gesture, and added another layer. It drew a symbol for human near one of the camps, then drew a large X through it. A warning. "This camp is too close to human activity. Abandoned." "You're running out of places to go," Jason said quietly. The teacher's eyes met his. In that moment, Marcus saw something he hadn't expected. Sadness, resignation, the knowledge of extinction. The teacher made one final gesture. It placed both hands on the hide, covering the star chart, and then lifted them away, revealing a new symbol drawn beneath in ash, a single figure, standing alone, with empty space all around. "Last one," Jason translated, or "the last of us." The teacher shook its head, another human gesture, and held up fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then more, counting higher. Not the last, but few. Critically few. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He was looking at a people on the brink of disappearance, clinging to existence in a world that had no space for them. They'd survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, the arrival of humans in North America. But they couldn't survive the 21st century, the roads, the development, the shrinking wilderness. "What can we do?" he asked, knowing the teacher might not understand. but the teacher seemed to grasp the intent. It reached out and took the carved wood, the object it had given Jason during the blizzard. It pressed the wood into Marcus's hands, then placed its own hands on top of his, holding them there. "Remember," Jason said. "It's asking us to remember." The teacher made the good sound. Then it stood, towering over them in the firelight, and made a complex gesture, hands moving from heart to sky to earth, a sweeping motion that felt ceremonial, final. "A blessing," Marcus whispered, "or a goodbye." The teacher walked to the edge of the firelight and paused, looking back one last time. Its eyes caught the flames, reflecting amber and gold. Then it stepped into the darkness and was gone. Marcus and Jason sat by the fire for a long time after, neither speaking. The carved wood rested between them, its symbols now heavy with meaning. Around them, the settlement stood empty, abandoned, its occupants melted back into the forest. Finally, Jason broke the silence. "We can't tell anyone about this. Not the government, not scientists. They'd turn this place into a circus. They'd capture them, study them, destroy them." "I know," Marcus said, "but we can't just forget either." "No, we remember. We protect. We keep the secret." Jason picked up the carved wood. "And if they ever need help, if they ever reach out again, we're ready." Marcus nodded. They packed their gear and began the long hike back, carrying the weight of what they'd witnessed. Behind them, the fire burned down to embers, and the valley returned to silence. 3 weeks passed. Marcus returned to his clinic, to the rhythms of rural medicine, but everything felt different now. He'd look out his window at the mountains and wonder what was happening in that hidden valley, whether the teacher and its people were safe, whether they'd survive another winter. He and Jason had agreed to strict protocols. The settlement's location would never be written down, never shared, never hinted at in any medium that could be traced. The carved wood remained in Marcus's safe, along with Jason's sketches and Marcus's notes. They destroyed the photographs, too risky, and encrypted the voice recordings, though they rarely listened to them. Some things were too sacred to revisit casually. But Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. In his spare time, he dove into the scientific literature, reading everything he could find about human evolution, hominid phylogeny, and the genetic evidence of archaic admixture. He learned about Denisovans and Neanderthals, about the fragments of ghost populations that lingered in human DNA. He learned that modern humans weren't the end point of a linear progression, but one survivor among many branches, most of which had gone extinct. What if they hadn't all gone extinct? What if some had simply learned to hide? He began to assemble a profile, a scientific framework for understanding what the teacher might be. Genetic analysis, if he could ever obtain a sample, would likely show divergence from modern humans somewhere between 300,000 and 1 million years ago, far deeper than Neanderthals. Morphology suggested a robust body plan adapted for cold climates. Large body mass for heat conservation, thick hair for insulation, a sagittal crest indicating powerful jaw muscles. The bare feet with divergent hallux hinted at arboreal ancestry, or at least the ability to navigate steep terrain with precision. But it was the cognitive abilities that fascinated him most. Tool use, symbolic communication, understanding of kinship and shared ancestry, the ability to teach, to transmit cultural knowledge across generations. These weren't the traits of a primitive or less evolved creature. These were the hallmarks of a fully human mind, expressed in a non-human body. He was so absorbed in his research that he almost missed the news when it broke. It was late March, the snow beginning to melt, when Linda came into his office with her phone held out. "Dr. Reeve, you need to see this." The headline was from a Seattle news station. "Bigfoot sighting sparks viral video, real or hoax?" Marcus's stomach dropped. He took the phone and watched the video. It was grainy, shot on a smartphone by someone hiking near Ross Lake, about 30 miles from the North Fork trailhead. The figure in the video was distant, partially obscured by trees, but unmistakable. Tall, bipedal, covered in dark hair. It moved across a snowy clearing and disappeared into the forest. The video had 2 million views. Marcus returned the phone with shaking hands. "It's probably a hoax." Linda raised an eyebrow. "You don't really believe that?" "It doesn't matter what I believe. We don't chase internet conspiracies." But that night, alone in his cabin, Marcus watched the video a dozen times, zooming in on every frame, looking for details. The figure's gait was wrong for a human in a costume. The proportions didn't match, the stride length was too long, and there was something about the way it moved, the fluidity and efficiency, that reminded him of the teacher. He called Jason. "I saw it," Jason said before Marcus could speak. "The video's everywhere. Wildlife forums, cryptozoology sites, mainstream news. Everyone's talking about it. Do you think it's them?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone hoaxing for attention." Jason paused. "But Marcus, if it's real, if people start looking, they could find the valley." "I know. We need to do something." Marcus closed his eyes. "Like what?" "We can't tell them to leave. We don't even know how to contact them. And if we try to protect the area, we'll just draw more attention to it. Then what do? We wait. We watch. And if things get worse, we figure something out." Things got worse. Within a week, the Ross Lake area was flooded with hikers, amateur researchers, and film crews. The Forest Service issued warnings about overcrowding and environmental damage. Local businesses cashed in, selling Bigfoot tours and themed merchandise. And inevitably, people started exploring farther afield, pushing into more remote areas. Marcus monitored the situation obsessively, tracking social media posts, watching for signs that someone had gotten too close to the North Fork Valley. He saw photos of tracks, some real, most fake, and blurry videos that proved nothing. The circus had come to the mountains. Then, in early April, Jason called him at 3 a.m. "Marcus, we have a problem. Someone posted coordinates online. They claim they found a Bigfoot camp, with structures and evidence of habitation. The coordinates are 5 miles from the valley." Marcus was out of bed and dressed in minutes. "Send me the link." He studied the post, uploaded to a cryptozoology forum by a user named TrailSeekerWA. The photos showed a shelter made of branches, a fire pit, and what looked like carved symbols on a piece of bark. The images were authentic enough to attract serious attention. Over 500 comments, including several from people planning expeditions to the coordinates. "We need to go there," Marcus said when he called Jason back. "We need to see if it's real, and if it is, we need to move them. Move an entire population of cryptid hominids. How? I don't know. But we can't just let them be discovered." They hiked out at dawn, moving fast, covering the 10 miles to the coordinates in under 4 hours. What they found made Marcus's heart sink. A small shelter, recently used, with a fire pit that still held warm ash. But it was empty. The teacher's people had already moved. They'd also left something behind. A piece of bark, carefully placed on a rock near the shelter's entrance. On it was a message drawn in charcoal, the symbol for human, followed by the symbol for danger, and a line pointing west, away from the valley. "They're leading people away from the real settlement," Jason said. "This is a decoy. It's not going to work forever." Marcus took photos of the symbols, then carefully erased them. "Someone's going to follow the tracks back to the valley. It's only a matter of time." They searched the area for 2 more hours, looking for signs of which direction the teacher's people had gone. They found tracks, deliberately obscured, but visible if you knew what to look for, heading northwest, toward higher elevation and more rugged terrain. "They're retreating deeper into the wilderness," Marcus said. "But that's not a long-term solution. Eventually they'll run out of places to go." Jason was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What if we could buy them time? What if we could convince people that the whole thing is a hoax?" "How?" "We fake a confession. TrailSeekerWA admits they made the whole thing up for attention. We seed doubt, discredit the evidence, make people lose interest." Marcus considered it. "That might work for the general public, but it won't stop dedicated researchers." And it won't solve the underlying problem: habitat loss, human encroachment, the slow squeeze of civilization. Then what's the answer? Marcus didn't have one. Over the following weeks, they tried Jason's plan. With some careful digital manipulation, nothing illegal, just enough to plant doubt, they managed to spread rumors that Trailseeker WA was a known hoaxer. The Forest Service issued a statement debunking the Bigfoot camp, attributing it to either human-made structures or natural formations. Slowly, interest waned. The media moved on to other stories. The hikers went home. But Marcus knew it was only a reprieve. In late May, he returned to the valley alone. He told no one where he was going, not even Jason. He carried the carved wood, unwrapped, held openly in his hands as he approached the shelters. The settlement was empty. The structures had been partially dismantled, the fire pit covered with stones. The teacher's people had moved on, leaving no trace except for the memories Marcus carried. He knelt by the remains of the fire pit and placed the carved wood on the ground. Then he pulled out a notebook and wrote a letter, not in English, but in the symbol system the teacher had taught him. It took him an hour to compose, his fingers numb from the cold, but when he finished, he folded the page and tucked it beneath the carved wood. The letter said, "We remember. We will protect your memory. We will not tell the world where you are, but we cannot stop the world from shrinking. Please, if there is a way to help you survive without destroying you, show us. We are listening." He waited for 3 days, camping in the valley, hoping for a response. None came. On the morning of the 4th day, he packed his gear and began the hike back. But as he reached the edge of the valley, he heard it, the low, resonant vocalization he'd come to recognize as the teacher's voice. He turned. The teacher stood at the far end of the valley, barely visible among the trees. It raised one hand, the gesture of greeting, and then made another sign, both hands pressed to its chest, then extended outward. Marcus understood. It meant, "We carry you with us." He repeated the gesture, tears stinging his eyes. Then the teacher turned and disappeared into the forest, and Marcus knew he would never see it again. He returned to his clinic, to his life, to the slow passage of seasons. He never spoke of what he'd seen, not to anyone except Jason, and even then, only in vague terms. The carved wood remained in his safe, a relic of an encounter that felt increasingly dreamlike. But he kept his promise. He monitored the mountains, tracked reports of sightings, and quietly intervened when necessary, debunking hoaxes, misdirecting interest, protecting the spaces where the teacher's people might still hide. It was a lonely vigil, but it was the least he could do. And sometimes, late at night, he would take out the carved wood and trace the symbols with his fingers, remembering the firelight in the valley, the weight of the teacher's hand on his shoulder, the silent understanding that passed between two species facing the same existential truth, that to be remembered is to survive, even when survival seems impossible. The mountains kept their secrets, and Marcus kept his. If this story moved you, if it made you wonder what else might be hidden in the world's wild places, subscribe to our channel for more speculative fiction that challenges everything you think you know about humanity's place in nature. Hit that notification bell, because some stories are too important to miss.